If you're looking for a movie that's unwavering in its depiction of the brutality, the futility of war, you can't go far past Stalingrad. Now, the thing about this film is that I like it when a country makes a film about a battle that they were actually in. There was another Stalingrad film from a few years ago, and it was made from the German perspective, and everybody died. It's truly horrible. But in the West, we don't see a lot of films telling the side of World War II that involved the Russians. So that's why I want to talk about Stalingrad.
Welcome to Shattered the Podcast.
Sharing the lived experience of mental illness on
A father,
A mother.
A family.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go!
Let's go.
So our film today is Stalingrad, and this is war films and mental illness. This film I've chosen because it doesn't really show the long-term effects of battle trauma on the soldiers, but it does an admirable job of showing the trauma that civilians and military alike went through in the Battle of Stalingrad. It has to be said that the Russians bore the brunt of World War II. There's no way that we can avoid that. And I am the last person that will try and give another country props, because Australia never gets our props for being in the war. I love these books that you read about the Pacific, and the only mention Australia has is that servicemen were here. It's like, yeah, but our soldiers were fighting effectively. Yeah. So Stalingrad tells a very, very Russian story of everybody dies. Seems to be a Russian movie thing, but in Stalingrad, it was very close to the truth. Soldiers were sent into battle under machine guns, not just from the enemy, but from their own side, ensuring that they didn't retreat. And there were brutalities innumerous throughout the war, throughout the Battle of Stalingrad. It was horrific. Historians have rated Stalingrad as being probably the worst place to fight a war in World War II, in the worst conditions. So the film itself tells the story of a rescuer. He's in Japan helping somebody be rescued after the earthquake and tsunami that happened. And he is within hand's reach of a girl that's trapped. They need to cut out the concrete. And she asks him to tell her a story. And he says, tell me about your father. And he says, oh, I have 5 fathers. And she says, what does that mean? And then he launches into the battle. Not really necessary, but I can see where the storytellers are going from. So, the Battle of Stalingrad, 5 soldiers from different units are kind of thrown together with a civilian woman who refuses to leave her apartment. She kind of falls in love with all of them. They're very kind to her once they initially get over the shock of what the hell are you doing here. She became kind of the reason that they were fighting. And, you know, particularly in the Russian conflict, you can't really say that, you know, whether they fought for themselves, for their mates, for their country, because all the Soviet Union told us is that they were dying gloriously for the motherland. But there's a group of soldiers that I've never actually seen depicted before, and these were the Scouts. These were more or less independent units. They didn't have political officers. They just were the best and the toughest. And there's a brilliant line right at the start of the movie, the scouts are walking past to go ahead to this horrible battle, and one of the Russians that is trying to cross the Volga looks at them and goes, "Oh, scouts. These are guys that the rules didn't apply to them because they were so necessary. They were tough and they had a very short life expectancy. So these men go in to help cover an attack, which, from my understanding, was a real attack. There were these huge, massive oil tanks on the bank of the Volga that neither side wanted to blow up because both sides knew that they could use the oil inside it. Anyway, the Russians attacked and the Germans exploded this oil facility. And I've read it before, but to see it, watching these Russian men covered in flame from this oil tanker explosion, running in and attacking the Germans, and just the Germans' just disbelief in the courage of these people. And that was a theme that in the writings of World War II, particularly in Stalingrad, they talk about the unbelievable stoic courage of the soldiers. Why I like this film is because the young female character, to me initially, she just seemed kind of thrown in there, bit of eye candy. But as the story progressed, you began to see how the Russians were fighting for a very personal reason. And it became this young lady that refused to leave her apartment. And there's this one scene where she's carrying water to the soldiers, and she's so oblivious or impervious or so used to the danger or so ready to prepared that any moment could be her death, that she's just walking down a corridor and these bullet holes go through the wall behind her and she barely flinches. I thought, oh, maybe that's a bit of Hollywood. I mean, it's Russian Hollywood, Rollywood. I don't know. Maybe that was hyperbole or an exaggeration, but on further reading, particularly of a Russian author called Grossman, who focused primarily on the people fighting the war, many of the Russian civilians were like that. They knew that if their time came, there was nothing they could do about it. So they just went on about things as if nothing was going on. If they died, they died. If they didn't die, it didn't matter. When you watch the men turn from savage animals in the fighting to gentle fathers and brothers to this young lady, it really brought home to me the dramatic change that a soldier must go through between I'm in country, I'm in battle, to now I'm home. How do you make that juxtaposition? How do you make that jump? Now, as I said, this is a Russian film, so the five fathers all die. Bravely, heroically for Stalin and the motherland. But the tragic truth is that of many of the soldiers that were actually inside the city, the Russian soldiers, most of them did perish. They were cannon fodder. But they stopped the unstoppable Nazi war machine. So where does this fall in the picture of mental health? When we consider as civilians that our brother, our father, our sister, our mother is overseas in a conflict, it can be easy to distance yourself from the reality of what they're going through. You think of like a film like The Green Berets or, um, any of those old ones where the soldiers went into battle happy, they fought the enemy with courage and honor and left with their honor intact. And of course, there was a few tragedies, but for the most part, everybody was fine. And that's our image of war. Our image of war is so distorted by our distance from it that I don't think we can truly comprehend that change that has to take place from this point where you could die at any moment to, hey, you're safe at home now and everything's fine. When soldiers come home from war, I've actually spoken to a couple and they've talked about this thought that nobody asks them about what they went through. Is it because we think that their story is like Saving Private Ryan and every soldier that went has got this deep trauma about trying to save somebody that, and if we mention something, we're going to bring back those memories. We're going to make it worse. This thought that a veteran comes home from one of the most significant events in their life and they feel like nobody wants to talk to them about it. They feel like nobody wants to know about what they went through. It's like they seem to believe that we don't care. And in many cases, it's a fear of omission. It's a sin of omission. I didn't ask because I didn't know if it was a sensitive subject. But I would encourage anyone, if you know a service man or woman that's come home, ask them about their service. Ask them. Say, have you got any stories you can tell me? What was it like? Did you get into the battle line? Were you shot at? They'll tell you pretty quick smart if they don't want to talk about it. But for the most part, they'll be like, yeah, man, I did this. My job was this. And you showing that little bit of interest could be the difference for that person's mental health that you can't even comprehend. This fact that somebody was back in Australia or whatever country you're in, somebody was back home thinking about me and they cared about what I went through. In the lead up to November 11th, my goal is for us civilians who have only seen war on the screen to perhaps gain a better insight into what the soldiers go through, are going through, will go through, and the fact that we have an opportunity when these gallant men and women come home. And I mean, your brother, sister might have just swept the mess tent out. That might have been their war, but they were serving their country. They deserve recognition. They deserve for us to be interested in what they're going through. This November the 11th, if you know a veteran, just reach out to them. Thank them for their service. I know that in Hollywood, it's kind of making it trite now to say, oh, thank you for your service. But there's no better way to get across the fact that you appreciate them. I hate saying it, but I do. I say, mate, just thank you so much for serving in our country. It's that hard. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow, counting down to the 11th of the 11th. 3 more days, so 2 more podcasts coming up. You've still got time to let me know what film you'd like me to talk about and why. Just chuck it in the comments below and I will definitely see it. Okay, see you tomorrow. Thank you for listening to Shattered the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.